Hi, hello. So in this video we are going to talk about another view component. So if you haven't seen the previous video, I really encourage you to look at it because I'll explain a view component. What is a view component? And I will just go a little faster on this one, on the basic, to just go on the specifics of the view component compared to the previous video. The previous video was about this example, custom label. So this video will show how to display associated data using JavaScript. So what is associated data? So you have a functionality inside Innovation Suite which enables to associate data from two record definitions. So for example, here I'm associating data from the dummy record definition to the dummy associate record definition using a many-to-many relationship. So of course you could use the BMC out-of-the-box object like a table to display the data that are associated to this entry, for example. But in my case, on some occasion when you're coding a view component, it can be interesting to get the data through inside your code. So I will show you how to do that. So to do this, the example will be display associated data inside the sample library project under view components. So in the previous video we saw what is a structure, so you're finding exactly the same structure. So the view component is called display associated data, and you can find it declared inside bx module and ext module.js. The configuration for this view component is a bit more complex. So if we are looking at the view containing this example, here you will see the view component, and you can see you have like 4 input parameters. And you can find those 4 input parameters here. One of them is string, field ID to display, field label to display, record instance ID, association name. So you can find field ID to display, field label to display, record instance ID, and the association name. So the field ID to display is 8, which is the description field ID. I'm just using description, it's not very important here. That's the field that will appear here. And the association name is the one we just saw earlier, here in association. So it's dummy to dummy associate. So it's very important not to give only the name, but also the complete name, meaning that it's a full name, the one with your bundle name, so your developer ID, your application name, and then the name of your association. This is very important later in the code. And so here we have, for example, a dummy record instance in the grid, and when I click on it and want to display association data associated with this dummy record. So in my case, I select a dummy record and I want the dummy associate records. So how is it working? So here I have my 4 input parameters. As we saw in the previous video, here is a directive for the design. So it's just what is displayed during design time in the view designer. So very simple. And here in the design, not in the design, but in the directive that will be used during runtime, so directive JS and data directive HTML, you can see here I'm just displaying a table and with GUID, and I'm doing just a ng repeat, and I'm displaying some data. So that's what's happening at runtime. GUID, and I'm displaying some data. So how is it working? So in my directive, we can see that is more complex than the custom label we saw earlier. So we find again our scope Rx configuration object. Rx configuration, like it said in the previous video, contains in properties by name the input parameters value passed by Innovation Suite to your view component. So in our case, it would be field ID to display, field label to display, reconst instance ID, and association name. So here I'm just saving the data. So for example, record instance ID, association name, field ID to display, field label to display, and the record definition name. I will explain why it's not B a bit later. So in order to get association, you can see I'm using the object from the SDK we provide to you, from the framework we provide to you, Rx Association Instance Data Page Resource. So what I want is to get the associated data with the dummy record I selected. So this object accepts several parameters. The first one is the number of data you want to fetch. The second one is what is the ID of the first record you want to fetch. So if you want to do pagination, for example, that's the kind of thing you could use. If you want to get all data, you could use -1. And I think if you do 0, you will get a count. But I kind of forgot about it. And then you've got some parameters. Inside the parameters for this object, you need to pass 3 information. The first one is the association name. So as we saw earlier, the association name is common example sample library dummy to dummy associate. The third one is the ID of the parent. So here, if you remember, the parent is dummy and I want the children which are dummy associates. So when I select here the entry in the grid, I will get the ID I selected and I want the information associated with this record. So this is the ID I'm getting inside as an input parameter. And this one is a node to query. And as you can see here, it's node B. So why node A, B? What does it mean? So at first it can be a bit confusing, but what you need to think is, what do you want to query? You want to get dummy associate data and you know dummy data. So think about node A would be the record definition on the left, node B the record definition on the right. So here you've got node A. So you are not interested in getting node A data because you know already about it. So you're interested in getting node B. So here that's why I'm telling I want the node B of the association. I want the right part, this part of the association. Because you could do also the other way around. If you knew, for example, the ID of the child, you could get the parent. And in this case, you would ask for node A. So in the query parameters, you just give the association name, the recount instance ID of the parent or the branch you know, and the node you want to query. So no, yes. So in this case, so you're getting Rx association data page resource, and with those parameters, and this object is going to give you a promise, a simple AngularJS promise. So you just need to do your promise.then. You will have a response, and this response, if you take the data inside of it, you will have your associated data. So then you can use it inside the simple ng repeat, and you can just, well, traverse it. So the thing to know is we are sending you back the field IDs. So you cannot do something like when data.id. You have to do you have to query the array, the specific entry in the array. So if you go in Chrome and you just run the session again, Okay, I'm sorry for that. I close it. Okay, so here you can see the REST API that is sent to the backend. And you can see that in the response, we are sending you back in data an object with key value pair. The key being the field ID. So 8, for example, would be the description. That's the value we are interested with. And the value would be the data stored inside this key value pair. So that's why when you're looking at the UI, so we are displaying the GUID, which is the field 179. And inside we wanted the field 8 in our record here. So that's why we are displaying test. So this one is a bit more complex. So basically, if you want to use data with association, this is the kind of object you want to get. And actually, if you want to also get data from a record definition without association, this is we are going to use basically the same structure in the end. So we are always, most of the time, are going to give you the number of data, where you're starting, and the parameters, and we are going to give you back a promise.